In the early hours of New Year's Day, while San Francisco was still marking the start of a new year, a quiet and unexpected story unfolded inside one of the city's most well-known hotels. Victoria Jones, a name rarely mentioned in headlines but one closely connected to Hollywood history, was found unresponsive in a corridor of the Fairmont Hotel. She was 34 years old. According to publicly available reports, emergency services were called to the hotel at 2:52 a.m. Paramedics responded, assessed the situation, and one individual was declared deceased at the scene. From there, the case was transferred to local authorities and the medical examiner's office, following standard procedure. At that moment, no cause of death was announced, and officials did not offer further details. One specific detail quickly drew attention. Reports indicated that another hotel guest had alerted staff after discovering Victoria Jones in a shared hallway rather than inside a private room. While this information alone does not suggest any conclusions, it immediately raised questions for the public. Authorities, however, remained cautious, emphasizing that the situation was still under review and that no assumptions should be made. Victoria Jones was the daughter of Academy Award-winning actor Tommy Lee Jones and his second wife, Kimberly Clofley. She was his younger child. Her brother Austin is now in his 40s. Although she grew up around the film industry, Victoria did not actively seek the spotlight in adulthood. Still, her early life included brief moments in front of the camera. As a child, she appeared alongside her father in films such as Men in Black 2 and The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, and she later had a role in the television series One Tree Hill. Her performances were limited, but those close to the productions noted that she was capable and professional. In interviews, Tommy Lee Jones spoke about her with pride, describing her as talented, disciplined, and fluent in Spanish, a skill she developed early in life. He once shared a story from a film set that, at the time, was told lightheartedly. During her teenage years, Victoria struggled with early call times required for filming. One morning, she refused to get out of bed before dawn. He reminded her that acting was work, and when she did not move, he jokingly dismissed her from the role. According to him, the production team later woke her and rushed her to set without his knowledge, just in time to film. What was once an anecdote about growing up around movies is now remembered with a different tone. As she got older, Victoria Jones appeared less frequently in public. While she occasionally attended events with her father, including international film festivals, she largely lived outside media attention. She did not maintain a visible public profile, did not give interviews, and did not attempt to build a career based on her family name. Her life, by most accounts, was intentionally private. That privacy is part of what made the news on New Year's Day resonate so strongly. When someone who has remained largely out of public view suddenly becomes the focus of international attention, people naturally search for clarity. Yet in this case, confirmed information remains limited. At this stage, officials have not publicly identified the cause of death, and no timeline beyond the emergency response has been released. Authorities have not suggested foul play, nor have they offered explanations, reinforcing that the investigation is ongoing. Media outlets have largely relied on official statements and verified sources, avoiding speculation. What is known is only the beginning of the story. Why Victoria Jones was in San Francisco, how long she had been there, and what led up to the early morning emergency call are questions that remain unanswered. And in situations like this, understanding often comes slowly, through verified information rather than immediate conclusions. This is where the confirmed facts end, and where the unanswered questions begin. What often goes unnoticed in stories like this is how carefully information is released in the first hours and days. When a death occurs in a public place, especially one involving a well-known family, authorities are required to verify every detail before making statements. This is not silence for dramatic effect, but a procedural pause meant to prevent misinformation from spreading too quickly. In the case of Victoria Jones, officials confirmed only what could be established immediately: the time emergency services were called, the location, and the fact that the individual was pronounced deceased. Beyond that, investigators rely on medical examinations, witness statements, and contextual evidence, all of which take time. Until those processes are complete, speculation is intentionally avoided. The Fairmont Hotel itself is a location associated with privacy and discretion. It regularly hosts public figures, international guests, and high-profile events. Incidents inside such spaces are handled with additional care, both out of respect for guests and to ensure accuracy. This is one reason why early reports remained limited to verified facts rather than interpretations. Public reaction, however, often moves faster than official processes. As the news spread, many people focused on Victoria Jones's last known location and the timing of the incident. The early hours of New Year's Day naturally drew attention, not because of any confirmed connection, but because of the contrast between widespread celebration and a quiet emergency response happening at the same time. It is a contrast that feels unsettling, even when no direct link exists. At the same time, it is important to understand what has not been stated. Authorities have not indicated any signs of criminal activity. They have not released statements suggesting external involvement. They have not shared details that would imply conclusions before the investigation is complete. Irresponsible reporting. The absence of information is not an implication, but a boundary. For those familiar with Hollywood history, the story also carries emotional weight because of Tommy Lee Jones's long and respected career. Over decades, he has been known as a private individual despite his public success. His personal life has rarely been part of his professional narrative, which makes moments like this feel especially stark. The loss of a family member is not a public event, even when it becomes public news. Victoria Jones herself never built her identity around visibility. While she had early exposure to the entertainment industry, her adult life remained largely outside public documentation. That choice often leaves fewer reference points when news breaks, creating a gap that people instinctively want to fill. But that gap is not evidence of mystery. It is evidence of privacy. In the days following such incidents, attention often shifts from the individual to the process. Medical examiners determine cause based on established criteria, not public pressure. Investigators reconstruct timelines using confirmed data, not online theories. Until those steps are completed, responsible coverage remains restrained. This careful pace can feel unsatisfying in an era of instant updates, but it exists for a reason. Early conclusions can be incorrect. Incomplete information can mislead. And once assumptions spread, they are difficult to correct. That is why official communication often sounds repetitive or minimal. It prioritizes accuracy over immediacy. What remains clear is that Victoria Jones's passing has been acknowledged with caution and respect by authorities and most major outlets. The focus has stayed on verified facts and on allowing the investigation to proceed without external influence. Any further updates, when released, will come through official channels. Until then, the story remains defined not by what is assumed, but by what is known, and by what has yet to be confirmed. And that leads to the broader question many people quietly ask in situations like this. How do private lives intersect with public attention? And where should the line be drawn when tragedy enters the news cycle? That question does not have a simple answer, but it shapes how stories like this are told, and why restraint matters as much as information. As the story continued to circulate, it became a clear example of how quickly public attention can shift from facts to interpretation. In high-profile cases, especially those connected to recognizable names, the pressure to explain events often arrives long before reliable explanations exist. That pressure does not come only from audiences, but also from the broader media environment, where speed is often rewarded more than precision. In this situation, many outlets deliberately chose a restrained tone. Reports relied on statements from emergency services, law enforcement, and publicly available records. Language such as, "according to sources and officials have not yet confirmed," appeared repeatedly, not as filler, but as a reminder of uncertainty. This approach reflects an understanding that accuracy is more valuable than speculation, particularly when a private individual is involved. For families connected to public figures, moments like this create a difficult balance. On one side, there is a public interest in verified information. On the other, there is the reality that grief and investigation are deeply personal processes. In Victoria Jones's case, there has been no public commentary from family members, and no attempt to shape a narrative beyond what has been officially confirmed. That absence of commentary is often misinterpreted, but it is also common in situations where families choose to grieve privately.
The public perception of such stories is also shaped by what people expect to find. Many assume that being connected to Hollywood means a life lived openly or dramatically. In reality, many children of well-known actors grow up deliberately separating themselves from that world. Victoria Jones' life appears to reflect that separation. Her limited public footprint suggests a conscious choice to live beyond headlines rather than within them. As time passes, investigations tend to move quietly. Results are reviewed, documentation is finalized, and findings are prepared before being shared. This period can feel like a pause, but it is actually the most active phase behind the scenes. It is also the phase that determines whether clarity arrives or whether a story remains unresolved in the public mind. What stands out most at this point is not what has been revealed, but what has been avoided. There have been no dramatic claims, no escalating language, and no rushed conclusions. In an online environment where intensity often drives engagement, restraint becomes noticeable. And in many ways, that restraint becomes part of the story itself. For viewers and readers, this moment invites reflection rather than reaction. It highlights how easily narratives can form without foundation, and how important it is to separate confirmed information from assumptions. It also raises broader questions about how tragedy is consumed in the digital age, and whether curiosity always needs immediate answers. As new information becomes available, it will likely arrive in measured updates rather than sudden revelations. Until then, the most accurate understanding comes from acknowledging what is known, accepting what is not, and allowing time to do its work. And that perspective naturally leads forward, not toward speculation, but toward context, toward understanding how stories involving public figures and private lives are reported, interpreted, and remembered. Because sometimes the most important part of a story is not the moment it breaks, but how it is handled after the attention fades. As the story reaches this point, what remains most important is perspective. Behind every headline is a real person, and behind every well-known surname is a life that exists beyond public awareness. Victoria Jones's passing has been reported through official channels with care, and the care reflects an understanding that not every question is meant to be answered immediately or publicly. In situations like this, the absence of detail is not a failure of transparency, but a reminder of boundaries. Investigations follow their own timelines, and families are given space that cannot be measured in news cycles. What the public receives is only a portion of a much larger reality, filtered through responsibility and verification. For viewers trying to make sense of events like these, the most reliable approach is patience. Information that matters tends to endure, while speculation fades quickly. As updates emerge, they will come from confirmed sources, shaped by evidence rather than urgency. This story also highlights a broader pattern in how we engage with news involving recognizable names. Attention often focuses on the connection to fame, even when the individual at the center lived quietly and intentionally outside that world. Understanding that distinction helps shift the focus from curiosity to respect. As more becomes known, the narrative will naturally evolve. But until then, the most accurate conclusion is also the simplest one. A life has ended, and the details are still being responsibly reviewed. In the next video, we'll take a wider look at how media coverage handles sensitive cases involving public figures' families and why restraint can sometimes tell us more than headlines ever could.